Alrighty, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's your boy Armored Silk. So today, I just want to give you guys a little bit of an update. We're gonna start doing political commentary and reactions Mondays and Fridays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. Um, so what we're gonna do is, we'll break down headlines, give voice to perspectives on things going on around the world. That maybe mainstream media won't cover, or that they won't cover so well, at least from a middle ground's point of perspective, right? Yeah, so I'm going to be open and honest and give my personal opinions on things that I see. And it won't just be from one news source, right? It'll be from different news outlets, and whether it's mainstream or other YouTubers channels and stuff like that. So definitely going to be doing that more often, like I said, Monday and Fridays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. So that's going to be the goal. And today we're going to get into so I know I'm a day late, but we're going to get into the U.S. Hitting Iran's nuclear facilities. And then I know two videos came out earlier today, or two things happened big today, right? That a lot of people have put videos out. The first one is Iran attacks one of our bases in Qatar. So yeah, we're gonna see what happens. I heard we had no casualties, so obviously that's a good thing starting off. But yeah, we'll get my perspective on that later on. And then this happened maybe a couple hours ago. Trump announces that Iran and Israel have agreed to a complete and total ceasefire. So I haven't looked at it. I haven't engaged in it. Whatever I see on that video, it's going to be first time reacting and my honest and open opinion going forward. And again, for those of you that don't know or are new to the channel, my background is I was in the military for 9 years or 8 years with the Marine Corps, close to 9. And then on top of that, I've done private contracting overseas as well. So I do know a little bit about some of the conflicts that we've engaged in, especially over the last 10, 15 years, give or take. With that being said, hey, you may not agree with everything that I say or voice, but at the end of the day, right, you're always engaged and challenge everything, question everything. Even if it's someone you like, trust but verify, right? That's a saying we say all the time in the military, especially if you mess up or something, you get that whole stick, trust but verify every single time, right? You see multiple channels, different streamers, different news outlets. I know we want to be one dimensional and just stick to what we know, but hey, get all the information you possibly can and make a decision from there. I'm not saying you gotta do a 180 or anything like that, right? Your opinions matter. I guess all I'm saying is just be a little bit more informed. That just makes you a better and more, me personally, it makes me a better American in terms of what I was from before, and makes me more patriotic, especially knowing that this is, at the end of the day, the best country in the world. So like I said, going forward, let's start the video.
The U.S. has just crossed one of Iran's red lines. It flew 7 heavy bombers carrying more than 400,000 pounds of explosives across the Atlantic Ocean directly to Iran with the intent of attacking the country's most heavily fortified nuclear facilities. And Donald Trump says it worked.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have
I know we did hit, what, 3 facilities in total, so.
That assessment is a very early one. The U.S. military says it does not yet know exactly how much damage it caused, except to say it's significant.
Initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
But what we know more about is how the U.S.
Now, it will be
military
interesting to see
says it
what
executed
information we get
such
out
a
of that.
complex attack.
Take a look at the facilities up here and over here. Now look, this is gone.
An attack that appears to
Well,
have
it's
caught
underground,
Iran
so it's not like you're going to be
completely
able to see it
off
from an
guard,
aerial
and for
view,
which
but
that
I
country
digress.
has now promised to make the U.S. pay everlasting consequences.
This is a plan that took
Okay,
months and
happy
weeks
birthday,
of
brother.
Positioning and preparation.
Glad you're
It took a great
joining
deal
us
of
on your
precision.
birthday. Thank you.
It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security.
What Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, along with America's top general, Dan Kane, laid out for reporters at a Pentagon press briefing was a plan whose success relied heavily on secrecy.
In and out and back without the world knowing at all.
Now, just for context, I know there was a lot of news, or I guess individuals that track flight patterns, especially for military. I know there was the one kid that was always tracking Elon's flight patterns, but essentially it wasn't a surprise that we were sending B-2s. I think it was more of a surprise that we attacked with the B-2s essentially 1 week ahead of time, right? So he'll go over that as well, but that's just what I got from it yesterday before I started doing this today.
At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, Operation Midnight Hammer would begin with a large strike force of B-2 bombers, leaving Whiteman Air Force Base just east of Kansas City, Missouri. This was the first attempt to fool anybody watching.
As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy.
Yes, this mission started with a fake-out, and we can tell, at least anecdotally, this westward flying decoy was noticed. Social media is full
Again,
of
like I said.
avid military plane spotters, like this one, posting tracking data of what they're seeing in the sky. And as the U.S. military had hoped, much of the focus appeared to be on the planes flying west. The easiest assumption would have been that they were deploying to Guam, Anderson Air Force Base. For Americans, one of the most
Which is one of our main
important forward
bases
operating
in the
bases west
Pacific.
of Hawaii, with almost unrestricted airspace. And look at these headlines from just before the attack. U.S. officials revealing to reporters that yes, as Trump mulled over a possible strike, he would indeed be deploying B-2 bombers to the region. Because from
Which we
Guam,
knew was
those
coming. He
warplanes
said it,
could fly
like, last
to
week,
another
so.
US base, Diego Garcia, in the heart of the Indian Ocean, and a critical staging ground for military missions in the Middle East. Operation Desert Fox in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, even during the Iranian Revolution in the late 70s, Diego Garcia, the island, was seen by the US as a kind of unsinkable aircraft carrier. So flying a set of bombers there might appear like typical US military behavior, especially for this part of the world.
That's a normal military
Yep.
operation for us. And when I saw the news, I wasn't surprised. All of warfare is deception, and that was a brilliant move by the United States, sending the B-2s to Diego Garcia.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, we do training missions and ops like this all the time. This is nothing new. I mean, you've got different training that we do with other nations as well, like with Korea, the Philippines, Thai Marines, all that. So we've got Corporal Gold that we do pretty much on an annual basis. So this isn't anything new. This isn't surprising in terms of that, but it was a nice segue into how they were able to dupe them, I guess.
And make it appear that they were going to be stationed there, ready and on call, not necessarily waiting to be attacking that night.
So this would have seemed to journalists like a key piece of the puzzle if Donald Trump was indeed seriously considering a bunker-busting strike on Iran's nuclear program.
And sorry, I don't mean to pause a lot. I will say this. I just learned this yesterday. President Trump, or the U.S., this is the first time the U.S. has ever attacked Iran first time ever, which is surprising because I would have thought we would have had some actual engagement, maybe not directly, but at least something, with uh, the air or sea. So for President Trump to be the first to do it, that was interesting to learn.
But look one more time at that social media post we showed you a moment ago. This one reply, date stamped almost exactly 1 hour after those B-2 bombers first took off, but noticing a different set of planes. 9 B-2s heading due east.
The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications.
See, this is a stuff that gets me intrigued. I love tactics and strategies, so this is definitely going to be interesting for me. And I hope it's interesting for you guys as well.
I suppose it's possible the person saw incorrectly, or that 2 of those bombers at some point peeled off. But the official count is 7. 7 of the most advanced stealth bombers in the world, maintaining as much radio silence as they can get away with, as they began what would be an 18-hour journey across the Atlantic.
Almost like submarine combat.
According to U.S. officials,
how you see it in the movies, they go all quiet, no talking.
Had to refuel in midair, something that required dozens of tankers at various aerial refuel points.
The operation of refueling a B-2 is complex, but it's routine. It's practiced, it's rehearsed, it's engineered down to the very last level.
Now, what's interesting is that under optimal conditions, these bombers are actually capable of flying almost that entire distance without refueling at all.
You want to be
but 2 things.
Full tank of gas, so to
you
speak.
Don't run a high-stakes military mission and risk running out of gas.
Oh, there you go.
For example, if you'll have to divert somewhere unexpectedly. But 2, payloads matter. These bombers were burning an incredible amount of fuel, in part because
of
each
weight
one was
and
carrying
height.
60,000 pounds of explosives. That's 2 30,000-pound bombs each. Bunker busters intended to penetrate literally hundreds of feet of mountainous rock.
It's like the size.
The only way anyone knows is possible to reach Iran's most heavily protected nuclear
It
facility.
literally looks like the size of a semi-truck.
But there was more.
At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 2 dozen
These are the things that
Tomahawk
intrigue me. Like I
land
said,
attack cruise missiles
a 3-pronged
against
attack.
key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan.
Yeah, so this is where the timing and logistics of the mission would become even more complex. And I'll explain how. As those bombers are approaching Iranian airspace, it's nighttime in Iran. 2 things are happening. 1, the bomber formation is linking up with air support, fighter jets meant to protect and distract as the entire.
I want to make a quick comment about that. I get they're essentially radio silent and didn't have any real communication on their flight towards or past the Atlantic. But I am really surprised that they didn't have any fighter jet escorts going over the Atlantic, because $2 billion per B-2, and for the greatness that B-2s are, I don't think they're really good against. And I may be wrong. I'll have to do some more research. But I feel like a fighter jet, if needed to, would be able to take out a B-2, because I don't think they're meant for dogfighting, essentially. So, like I said, I'm just surprised that they didn't have an escort going over the Atlantic. So, yeah.
2 Iranian nuclear sites, Natanz and Fordo, where the vast majority of the country's uranium enrichment happens. But timed with their entry into Iran, a U.S. submarine launches cruise missiles, dozens of them, from just off Iran's southern coast. These are fired early, but because of their travel time, they are timed to strike Isfahan. That's a 3rd nuclear site immediately after Natanz and Fordo are hit by the bombers, so as to maintain the surprise factor of the main mission.
At approximately.
And another thing, I know that they said that it it was just meant to be a surprise factor. But me personally, I think they were soft. The other missiles that were sent out ahead of time was also meant to soften up the target area, so that way they had an even better chance of getting the bunker busters through to where the intended target was. Because they said like some 80 meters below ground, so soften the ground up. First bunker buster, then the second one, make sure it gets down all the way. That's just me personally. I think that's what happened and why they were, again, surprise factor as well. But I think that was more of a secondary than a main.
Approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas.
14 bombs at 30,000 pounds each. That's approaching 500,000 pounds of explosives dropped in all. And we can see from satellite imagery.
All right, that is actually a crazy amount of explosives. I've been at explosives that were around anywhere from like 5 to like 50 pounds. I can't even. Jeez. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've seen it. I've been around the shockwave from like miles out, but I can't even imagine half a ton of explosives. That's just, yeah, that's crazy. I haven't seen the actual targets being hit, so we are going to get into some of those videos as well. But yeah, just want to put that out there.
What the main attack on Fordo left behind. This is what that nuclear site looked like before the attack. It's buried deep beneath these mountains. And here's what it looked like after. That bluish gray is what experts believe is ash and debris kicked up by the blast.
Jeez.
But look particularly at this area here. The before, nothing really unusual about the dirt or the ridges in the mountains. But the after, 2 very clear sets of
It almost
three
seems like the
holes,
ridge
what are
itself
believed
has
to
like
be the
collapsed
exact points at which some of these bunker busters
on the
pierced
left
through
side
the earth to reach the hundreds of uranium centrifuges thought to be below. The hole patterns line up with how these bombs are meant to be used on a site like Fordo, which again is built much deeper than a single one of these bombs can actually reach. So the idea is to drop several of them
one after another.
effectively down the same hole, or
It's like
as close
cornhole.
to that as you can get, so that with each successive bomb, you're drilling closer and closer to the target, either just outright destroying it or causing enough structural damage to effectively accomplish the same thing. When all was said and done, all 3 sites had been hit by the bombers and the Tomahawk missiles within a window of about 25 minutes from the first attack to the last. That's a very tight window if you consider the total mission time was more than 30 hours.
I'm not
Well,
sure what
you
intel
practice
analysts
and
are
deal with
hanging
more
around
on the
Iranian
training end
leadership
than you
right now,
actually do
but,
with
no one calculated
fun
that
side,
the United States still
so
had
to
this
speak.
capacity to leave from an airbase in Missouri and
You
fly,
practice more than you play,
to the
right?
Middle East and fire up this mission and then fly home.
And according to US officials, American warplanes didn't suffer a single scratch.
We are unaware of any shots fired.
Right. Don't get me wrong. I love that we did this, but that's not surprising considering Israel has taken now most of their air defenses. So, not surprising one bit.
Fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us.
If they have any left, that is.
Right now, there are 2 really big questions. The first is, how does anyone know how much damage was caused when
You won't.
all you can see on the surface is holes?
I wouldn't be surprised if Israel tries to get some commandos there, likely U.S. Forces, JSOC, Special Ops, put a small crew.
Okay,
and
this
small
is the first
team
I'm
together
hearing
to
of
go
that.
try to
I don't
put
think
their
that's
eyes on it
happening at all.
themselves,
At least
just to
not
see
in
what
the
exactly is going on to
ne-
try to
That would have to be
get battle damage
weeks
assessment.
out.
And I think that's going to be the most reliable, which is why this whole process is going to take weeks.
I should point out, though, I've also
okay.
seen reporting suggesting that in the days leading up to the attack, there was unusual truck and vehicular activity at Fordo, 16 cargo trucks along the access road, which, if nothing else, raises the possibility that Iran
they're moving
might have
that?
been shuttling nuclear materials out of Fordo. in
Yeah,
anticipation
no.
of the worst.
See, look,
We just
I'm not buying that because if you're gonna do it for one, you're gonna do it for all three facilities. You wouldn't take the risk of losing that much uranium if you're really that interested in nuclear weapons or just nuclear plants in general. You're not taking the chance. If you know that you're gonna get attacked, you're taking all three. That's just my opinion on that. So
don't know. Iran has downplayed the attack, saying the damage was not irreversible, but at the same time swearing it would take revenge.
The Iranians have made very clear that they are prepared to attack U.S. forces and the countries that are basing them if the United States were to get in.
The United States has over 40,000 soldiers in the Middle East, most of whom are in the Gulf and would be at some serious risk if Iran decided to engage them.
They may also be prepared to take action.
I think it's like
against
40,000 in the
oil
Middle
and
East, like
gas,
100,000
transport
in
infrastructure depots that are
South
either
Pacific,
in
like
those countries or
Korea and
transiting
Japan and
Straits of
stuff.
Hormuz. They could take action to try and close the Straits of Hormuz that would further ensnare the United States into the conflict and run the risk of damaging international trade.
Iran's foreign minister has warned of everlasting consequences, saying Iran reserves all options to defend its
Paper
sovereignty,
tiger.
interest, and
I
peace.
swear, bro.
Iran says it fired missiles
Everlasting
at an American
consequence.
airbase
That's
in Qatar. Qatar says its air defenses intercepted Iran's missile attack.
But so too has the U.S. threatened Iran, because in its view, this was a very limited strike against very specific targets. And if Iran were to seek retribution, Donald Trump says the U.S. can and will find other targets to hit.
There will be
Oh, absolutely, as we should.
or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
So the really big question, after more than a week of death and destruction, Israel and Iran locked in a deadly series of missile strikes, is whether the U.S. becoming more directly involved than ever before might just end the war or start a new one.
Look, before we get into the next video, I do want to say this. I know that a lot of people have been saying that we're doing a preemptive strike. But in all honesty, no, we're not. This isn't, first of all, Iran's been funding terrorism for the last, 40 years, 30 years, give or take, at least. They've attacked U.S. service members, bases, facilities, either through proxy or directly. January 8th, 2020, they attacked one of our bases in Iraq. We lost 5 service members then. We got lucky this time. We didn't lose anyone, as far as we know at the moment, right? So this isn't something preemptive in terms of just we're scared, or not scared, but we're doing something because we don't want them to have nukes. Iran's been attacking us this entire time, again, through either direct or proxies. At some point, you keep getting bit by a little chihuahua. Sometimes you just gotta give it a little kick, right? And if that doesn't work, you punt the motherfucker. Excuse my French, but that's just my point of view, right? Because just like, and I'm paraphrasing here, George Washington said, you never let your enemies retreat and come up with a new battle plan, right? You take them down when they're weak, because that way there's no way for them to come back. So again, for us, while we have the opportunity, while Iran's air defenses are down or non-existent at this point, you take out their ports, keep hitting their military facilities, and just watch them wither away. All right, their economy is trash, their military is trash. And I think this is a time to take advantage. At minimum, continue to fund Israel in terms of attacking them in that regard. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. But let's keep going into the next video.
Let's now switch to Israel. Go to our chief foreign correspondent.
And this is mainly about the attack that Iran did today at our base in Qatar. So
Trey Yingste's live in Tel Aviv with the latest, not only from Israel, but what do you make of the fact that this appeared to be a pretty limited response, Trey?
again, paper tigers.
Yeah, John, good afternoon. We're getting more information from regional sources right now on this Iranian attack targeting the Al Udeid air base just outside of Doha, Qatar. The latest information that we have, according to the Qatari Foreign Ministry, they say these missiles were intercepted over the Qatari capital of Doha. They say there are no injuries on the ground, and the Qataris are condemning this attack launched by Iran. This is significant, but not unexpected. The distance between Qatar and Iran is just over 100 nautical miles, and this is a large base, the largest American base in the region, and it had largely been evacuated, according to one source that we spoke with before this attack took place. The Americans understood that Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain could be on the top target list for the Iranians in any sort of response following those strikes that were ordered by President Trump to go after Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend. We're working to get some confirmation about reports that American bases in Iraq may have been targeted. But again, the information that we have about the Gulf is significant. There are air defense systems in Qatar, both the THAAD missile defense system and the Patriot system. And according to some initial video that we reviewed from sources in Doha, it looks like, if not all, but the majority of these incoming missiles were shot down overhead.
Yeah, like I said, I got information that no one had died. I know, obviously, we took damage to facilities and stuff, but I'll take that over a service member dying any day,
you could see
all
on
day.
flight radar maps a number of flights diverting to other regional airports. And again, that condemnation coming in from the Qataris. We're also monitoring Iranian state media at this hour, who says that they launched this attack, calling it.
This will be interesting to see what Qatar does now, because I don't want to say Qatar is kind of, I mean, obviously they've had their issues. We've had our issues with them. But for now to attack, for Iran to attack Qatar, you may have just gotten rid of one of your last allies, or not an enemy in that area, because you already pushed away Saudi. You lost Syria for the most part, if not totally. So it's just getting worse and worse for Iran in terms of having someone in their corner. And then on top of that, I haven't heard anything from Russia or China coming to their defense, whether it's news outlets or actual weaponry and stuff like that. So Iran is just, it's getting worse and worse for them.
At the annunciation of victory, Iranian state media also saying their military says this was a devastating and powerful attack. This is not unexpected propaganda to receive from the regime in Tehran, but again, an indication that the Iranians are looking to save face following this U.S. strike that went after their nuclear facilities over the weekend. Other regional countries, including Kuwait, Bahrain, and the U.A.E., do remain on high alert at this hour over concern that there could be further attacks on U.S. interests in the region. Of course, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. There are also thousands of American forces in Kuwait. And then the possibility that Iraq could be targeted as well.
Well, the thing is,
take it back to 2020 when the American.
I will say this. I've done some contracts over there as well. I think Kuwait is probably going to be one of the last ones for them to make a decision of attacking. Because if you attack Kuwait, essentially, I know Kuwait's a sovereign country, but if you attack Kuwait, that's almost like attacking Saudi. And I'm pretty sure Saudi will have none of that, so.
Americans ordered that drone strike against Qasem Soleimani outside of Baghdad's international airport. The Iranians responded then with 13 ballistic missiles against the Ain al-Assad air base
January
in
8, 2020.
So, of course, missile defense systems across the region remain on high alert. Again, the Americans knew this was a possibility and largely evacuated much of their personnel from these areas. John, Sandra?
All right, just going through the Qatar response here. Qatar saying it reserves the right to respond after this Iranian attack. As John just just reported, Qatar is saying no casualties from that attack at the U.S. military base. Thank goodness. And the
Or
top
to their own
security
people.
body there, Iran's top security body there, is saying the armed forces used the same number of bombs that the U.S. had used in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. That is per the latest statement that we've been digesting, Trey.
I don't know if that's
Please
supposed to
do
mean
weigh
something
in
when
on that. As
right.
John and I were just discussing, is what we're seeing, is this evidence of diminished capabilities on the part of Iran?
100%. Look, when you
The types of missiles that the
when you can't even get your own airspace going and protect it, I mean, that says a lot. That's for being one of the stronger, air quotes, right, strongest militaries in the world. That's kind of pathetic. Because what you've got us, China, Russia, Korea, and then obviously like Germany, England, in like the top 10, right? And Iran's up there. I think they're like number 6 or 7. So the fact that you can't protect your own airspace, that is a bad sign for you. Because if you lose the air, you lose the battle in the modern world.
Iranians are likely using against American interests in Qatar, as Jennifer noted, are some from their shorter range arsenal.
Especially if you're
Cruise
essentially a
missiles or
landlocked
possibly
country.
Medium-range ballistic missiles, but not the same missiles that they were using over the past 11 days to target major Israeli population centers. A Qatari source just sending me another statement that I do want to just read here live. From a spokesman for Qatar's foreign minister saying, "We reaffirm that dialogue is the only way to overcome the current crisis and ensure the security in the region and the peace of its people remains." And so the Qataris still, amid all of this, encouraging diplomacy and dialogue in the region. They have been one of the leaders in the Middle East over the past more than 600 days, trying to de-escalate regional tension, bring all parties to the table, and ultimately find some sort of off-ramp, ceasefire agreements, or at least temporary understandings. But as this war develops between Israel and Iran, there is concern that this could spiral and continue, because we heard from President Trump directly, we heard from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, that any attack on American interests in the region would be met with a response. Everyone from American officials to current and former Israeli officials warned Iran against such an attack taking place. Now,
Which I don't know what we're going to see in this next video. It was breaking news, popped up about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours, give or take. Trump announces Iran and Israel have agreed to a complete and total ceasefire. After that attack, I'm on the opposite position. We got hit. We hit them back 10 times harder. We take out their ports. We take out their military facilities. Obviously, try to reduce or minimize, or if possible, not have any civilian casualties. But yeah, at this point, we might as well go all in while they're still down. That's just my 2 cents.
while this is limited in nature, it certainly does bring this entire conflict into a new chapter and raises questions about how the Americans might respond to this direct attack on their largest military base in the Middle East. This is a base that normally houses around 10,000 U.S. personnel. We have reported from the Al-Udaid base just outside of Doha. It's about a 30-minute drive from the U.S. Embassy in the Qatari capital. And it's a place where there's a lot of coordination for U.S. Central Command. You might remember back in 2021 when those evacuation flights were taking place. Many of them were landing from Kabul, Afghanistan to Doha, Qatar at this airbase. And so it's a base that was built in the late 90s. It cost around $1 billion to build. And it is still owned by the Qataris, but it is, again, the largest American base in the region. And there is close coordination for U.S. Central Command done out of this base.
I feel like that's pretty standard, though.
Before this took place. And again, according to a spokesman for Qatar's foreign ministry, no one was injured in this missile strike launched by Iran. But again, this shows that the Iranians are willing to respond directly to American interests in the region. And even before the war between Israel and Iran erupted 11 days ago, with this Israeli strike starting against the top IRGC officials, Iranian nuclear scientists, and, of course, Iran's nuclear program, the United States was preparing for this possibility. You might remember about 2 weeks ago, President Trump ordered a partial evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. There was a voluntary evacuation for the dependents of U.S. Embassy personnel and military spouses and children in places
I don't
like
know
Bahrain
why
and Kuwait. The United
civilians
States
are still
understood
over there.
that as a war would develop between Israel
If
and
you're not
Iran,
military
that
personnel or
US
government
interests in the
personnel, I
region
think
could come under attack.
all family
And of
members
course,
should
with those
come
U.S.
back.
strikes against the Iranian nuclear
Temporarily,
facilities, those
right?
3
Until
facilities
everything's
over
sorted.
the weekend, the officials here have been bracing for such a response. Israeli officials, though, remain on high alert, understanding that this is certainly not the end of Iranian response as it relates to Israel. But as for American forces in the region, again, the latest information that we can report attributable to Qatari officials is that there were no injuries in these strikes that took place,
Which is good.
just earlier this hour. And there is initial reporting coming in right now from the New
no
York
injuries,
Times
no
indicating
deaths.
that Iran coordinated the attacks with the American air base in Qatar, and Qatari officials gave advance notice that the attacks were coming to minimize the casualties. Again, that information attributable to the New York Times, but this is not surprising because they did a very similar coordination back in 2020 in response to the killing of Qasem Soleimani, that drone strike that President Trump ordered.
Was it
This
January
was meant to
8th,
contain
2020?
possible escalation in the region. And so we'll work on matching that reporting.
We did
from the
lose
New York
5
Times,
service
but it would
members,
not be
though, so-
surprising that the Iranians wanted to coordinate their response as to not drag more officials and militaries in the region into the current war that is escalating between Israel and Iran. Guys?
You know, as you're on the air, Trey, you probably can't see it. We're getting some pretty spectacular footage of the missile intercepts there. We don't know if it was all
here we
just
go.
American Patriot missiles or if there were other anti-missile devices that were set up into the sky as well. But it's looking very much like Israel did over the last couple of weeks. Apparently, the Iranians have given this a name, Operation Fatah's Blessing, against the American Al Udeid air base in Qatar. This question to you. So we saw the response at the Al-Assad air base, and somewhere up to 17 missiles fell on the Al-Assad air base. The fact that this was very limited, Iran says we matched the number of missiles to the number of bombs that were dropped on Iran. We had a number of 6 given to us by the Israelis, which would be far below the number of bombs that were dropped on Iran. I mean, does this suggest that this is merely a symbolic response so that the Iranian regime can say we punched America in the nose, whereas really,
Again,
I mean,
paper
they didn't even
tigers.
ruffle a hair on our forehead?
Yeah, absolutely. And they do this often to try and
yep,
contain
just like
possible
Korea, right?
escalation in the region. We were on the ground in Baghdad, Iraq, when that other ballistic missile attack took place back in 2020. And there was an understanding that American interests could be moved. There was a warning to U.S. troops to prepare to get into shelters. There were a lot of minor injuries for forces then from the blast of those missiles back in 2020. But this coordination does take place to try and contain escalation. And in terms of Iran's capabilities across the region, it's important to remember that Iran still, despite the fact that Israel and the United States have gone after Iranian interests within their own country, and the Israelis have gone after these ballistic missile launching positions and other IRGC capabilities, weapons storage facilities, for example, the Iranians still have the ability to operate from other countries. They can through their proxies. These Iran-backed Iraqi
Which
and
again,
Syrian
they've been
Shia
doing
militias
they've been doing
launch
to us
limited
for
attacks
30
with
years,
missiles and rockets
40
toward,
years.
American interests in the region, and there are no reports indicating that that has taken place. And so Iran still has the ability to ratchet up the pressure against American interest in the Middle East, but it appears here they are trying to coordinate some possible response as to not drag the United States more directly into the fight. There's an understanding that the Americans have a capacity and they have weapons that the Israelis do not have, and a willingness, if American forces or interests in the region come under attack, to get more directly involved in the fight. And the regime in Tehran has been extremely weakened.
I will say this, right? Obviously, we don't want boots on ground, especially after just coming out of another war. But if we get involved, like, this is the thing. Most people don't realize or forget that essentially we haven't used our entire military force since, like, what, the Korean War is probably the last real time that we've used it. Or I guess you could say like Iraq first as a storm, where we crushed their military. If we actually use our entire military force, there really isn't a country in the world that can take a stand, right? Maybe if a few of them got together, like the big countries, they could hold their own to some degree. But yeah, I don't think Iran is gonna want us to get involved, even more than what we're already involved, especially when it comes to force on force, right? Iraq and Afghanistan was a little bit harder because there was guerrilla warfare, is unconventional. And I will say this, not really our forte overall, but we do adapt. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks.
Following the 11-day campaign that the Israelis have launched not only against their nuclear facilities, but also against top IRGC officials. Remember, in that opening wave, the Israelis took out nearly the entire chain of command for the IRGC Air Force commanders in the Iranian capital of Tehran. We've spoken with top Israeli intelligence officials who have described to Fox News how they are systematically hunting down Iranian officials. And this gives you a sense of how their military chain of command has been decimated over the past week and a half. And so they're still able to coordinate this response. There is
I will say
that this is
Israel's
a very large
intelligence
country, more than 90 million
is
people in Iran. And so,
probably
of course,
one of the best, if not
going to be a regional
very
war, it would come in waves.
very close
and so
to
they
us.
have capabilities. They still can target U.S. interests in the region. But again, it appears today that they've tried to limit this with just targeting initially this U.S. base just outside of Doha, Qatar. And according to reports, coordinate their response as to not drag the United States into the war more directly. Guys?
All right. Trey, also just want to get this in here. Bahrain now says it has shut down airspace temporarily amid fears of retaliation by Iran against these U.S. attacks.
Yeah, because we have bases in like so many countries in the Middle East. Essentially, pretty much every country.
President Trump is not yet in that situation, the situation room for that security meeting.
Jordan,
So
Iraq,
we do
Afghanistan.
anticipate that is
Well,
still
not Afghanistan
happening, but we
anymore,
haven't
but,
gotten yet word that he has entered that meeting.
UAE,
Trey, we'll get back
Qatar,
to you very shortly.
Hey everyone, I'm
Bahrain.
Emily.
So yeah,
Catch
essentially
me and my
almost every
co-hosts
country,
Harris Faulkner and Kaylee
or the
McEnany
majority
on
of them.
Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR.
All right. Then this is going to be the last video of the stream. This was Trump announces Iran and Israel come to an agreement on ceasefire. I haven't seen any of this. I'm not sure what's going to happen, or if if they dupe me into watching it with the title, but we'll get into it.
About what happened with Iran in the Middle East and some breaking news coming just now. Joining us this evening.
And this is as of what, 3 hours ago, so this is pretty recent.
Seconds ago, the president went to Truth Social and typed this. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Complete and total ceasefire is what he typed.
Yep.
What does that mean? How did it come about? What's the development?
Yeah. Well, we were.
I will say this. One or two scenarios comes out in this. It's either we really did essentially attack or destroy their nuclear capabilities. And they're like, well, we got nothing now. Or they're just biding their time and trying to make a comeback for later in the years. But it will definitely be interesting to see.
We're actually working on that just as I left the White House to come over here. So that's good news that the president was able to get that across the finish line. I think what it means, Brett, is quite simple. First of all, the president, without, knock on wood, having a single American casualty, obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. We are now in a place where we weren't a week ago. A week ago, Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. So that's a very, very big thing. Now, what that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies and, of course, the American people, most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild.
I want to get to the obliterated part in just a minute, but I just want to read this fully so I get the context.
Well, if Iran's willing to,
it has been fully agreed by.
If Iran's willing to agree to a ceasefire, I mean, like I said, we might have destroyed their nuclear capabilities. So, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks.
And between Israel and Iran, that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point, the ceasefire for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will.
Oh, this sounds so
congratulate
bad.
both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world.
Look, if that is the case,
this
then
is all coming together.
cool.
That's right.
And when you
It
left
worked
the White
out
House,
probably
were you thinking this was
as
all
good as he'd hoped
gelling
for.
here?
When I left the White House, I
But-
thought that we might be able to get it across the finish line
Jeez.
before this broadcast, and it looks like the
I'm
president
not
has
holding
been
my
able to do
breath in that
I mean, look,
regard.
He's been working the phones constantly. Frankly, before the 12-day war started, but certainly over the past 12 days, the president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon. We, of course, destroyed the nuclear program
Which I
that
agree
they
with,
had,
of course.
And the president told the entire team, we're going to work to make sure that they don't try to rebuild that nuclear capability in the future. And it's, look, this is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed
They
the
did most of the
conventional
love
missile
you-
capability of Iran. That
They did most of the
threatened
heavy
Israel.
lifting.
For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path
Ah.
of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president really hit the reset button and said, look, let's actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Would you be surprised if Iran is sending out signals that it doesn't have a specific ceasefire plan? How would the communication have been with the Iranians to get this level
Jeez,
of
I wish I could
confidence
be
to put out
in
there?
on those
One of
conversations.
the things I've learned, Brett, about
Be
the
a
Iranians
fly on
in
the
the
wall.
past, 4 or 5 months that I've been in this job is what they say publicly and privately can sometimes be very different. I think what the Iranians have shown very clearly is they don't want this war to go on for much longer. Their air defenses have been totally destroyed. Their conventional missile program has been largely destroyed. And of course, their nuclear program has been obliterated, as I said before. So I think the Iranians are at a place where they don't want to keep on fighting. You saw the president, and I don't have the truth in front of me, but he talked about the next 6 hours finalizing the attacks. I mean, I think what he's talking about is right now, for the American people watching, it's dark over there. That's typically when the Israelis and the Iranians have been shooting at each other. I think there's
Night
some
ops,
recognition that might continue for another few hours, and tomorrow really is a new day. The end of the 12-day war, the end of the Iranian nuclear program, and I really do believe the beginning of something very big for peace in the Middle East.
So you said totally obliterated. The president has said totally obliterated the Iran nuclear program.
Yeah.
I mean, until we get eyes on it, we won't know for
where all
sure.
the highly
I don't
enriched
think we'll know for sure.
Well, Brett, I think that's actually not the question before us. The question before us is, can Iran enrich the uranium to a weapons-grade level, and can they convert that fuel to a nuclear weapon? And we know, based on the success of our mission, and of course,
questions.
the leadership of the president, but the incredible skill of our military, that the two mission objectives are completely successful. We know that they cannot build a nuclear weapon. Now, you asked about the highly enriched uranium.
Yeah, like 900 pounds of it.
But what we know, Brett, is that uranium is something that exists in very large supply. Our goal was to bury the uranium, and I do think the uranium is buried, but our goal was to eliminate the enrichment and eliminate their ability to convert that enriched fuel into a nuclear weapon. I think this is an important point, Brett, because so many of the folks who have focused
So I was
on
just
the
looking up real
highly
quick
enriched
how much uranium you'd need to make a nuclear bomb. You'd need between 2.2 and 22 pounds of uranium 235 to make a nuclear bomb. So 900, geez, that's a lot of nukes. All right, let's Yeah, let's keep going. Definitely good that we took that out.
Has been to destroy their enrichment capacity because we don't want that 60% uranium to become 90% uranium. That's the real concern, and that's what was so successful about our mission.
So after all this, if the Iranian government survives as is, what's to stop it from rebuilding over time if they in fact moved the 60% highly enriched uranium? You know, that's the concern.
No, the big concern, Brett, and this is again what we destroyed, is their ability to enrich uranium. If they have 60% enriched uranium, but they don't have the ability to
ammunition, yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's lying. I'm sure they probably did come up with a ceasefire, but I don't hold my breath in the sense that Iran's going to actually follow through with it. So I'm right there with you.
To build a nuclear weapon in the future, then they're going to have to deal with a very, very powerful American military again. Our hope is that the lesson that the Iranians have learned here is, look, we can fly a bunker buster bomb from Missouri to Iran completely undetected without landing once on the ground, and we can destroy whatever nuclear capacity you build up. I think that lesson is what's going to teach them not to rebuild their nuclear capacity.
Yesterday, were you speaking on the president's behalf when you said he was not interested in regime change?
Well, Brett, what I've said is the American military, that is not our mission as regime change. Our mission was to destroy the nuclear facilities.
Yeah, nor should we ever want to care about
I think what the president's also said is that the Iranian
changing
people
political
want to make a
powers
decision about
overseas.
regime
That's not
change.
our
That's
job.
between
We
the
stay away
Iranian
from it.
people and the regime. Of course, we support freedom
They
fighters
usually
all around the world.
backfires on
Our
us
mission
every time we get
was to
involved in
destroy
that.
the nuclear facilities.
Going back to like
So
the
you don't think there's any
50s.
mixed message when he goes to Truth Social and says it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA.
Again, not up to us.
Clearly, Brett, is
We
if the
shouldn't get
Iranian
involved in
people
terms of
want
that.
to do something about their own leadership, that's up to the Iranian people. What the
Yeah,
American
on this point, I
national
agree with
interest
him.
here is very simple. It's to destroy the nuclear program. That's what we've done. And now that the 12-day war appears to be effectively over, we have an opportunity, I think, to restart a real peace process. And
I guess
this is not
we will
just
find out
about
tomorrow,
two
guys.
countries, Iran and Israel. All of these Gulf Arab states, they want peace. They want to invest. They want to build artificial intelligence hardware. They want to sort of come into the new economy. And that was impossible when you had Iran that was, as the president said, acting like a bully across the Middle East. We really think that if the Iranians are smart about the path forward, this could be a new dawn of an economic age of prosperity, of course, for our Gulf Arab allies, for us, for the Israelis, for everybody. But it's going to require the Iranians play it smart from here.
The president called it very weak, the Iran missile firing on the U.S. base in Qatar, El Udeid.
Weak and pathetic.
Was it a face-saving move? How do you get from that, firing missiles at a U.S. base, to a ceasefire, as he details in this trip?
Well, as the president said,
It's like, you're lost in the fight, but your girl's there, and the guy beating you up lets you get one good hit in. Not even a good hit, but get a hit in to show face. That's essentially what it was, right? Let us hit you one time when we won't kill anybody, and then we'll call ceasefire after that, right? Make us look like we did something good. It's essentially what they're doing.
they actually gave us some warning here. And we think they gave us some warning because they didn't want to kill Americans and they didn't want to escalate.
Yeah, again,
there's definitely some
why even bother?
If you look at the Iranian attack, it was 14 missiles that they telegraphed ahead of time. We dropped 14 bunker buster bombs. As the president told me earlier, our missiles,
He almost
our
wanted
bombs
to
were a
laugh.
little bit bigger than their bombs. Our bombs actually accomplished the goal of eliminating their nuclear program. But look, we're happy, again, to restart the peace process as the president just did today.
Was the
Possibly.
message delivered directly to
It's hard to tell nowadays with politics, man. Everyone's so good at lying.
That's been consistently true of the Iranians. Of course,
I just hope that isn't the case, him being a prime military person. I know there are a lot of, there can be a lot of snakes in the military,
Why did
but
the president do what he did over the past week?
I guess we'll have to see here in the next
If they try to
couple
rebuild
weeks
it,
or a couple
they're gonna be on
years,
the wrong end of
rather.
American power once again. We don't want that. I think they don't want that, but the ball's in their hands.
You've been reluctant or at least cautious about getting engaged previously, and that has been public. What made you sign on to this action this time?
Well, I think the president has been very clear, and I've always agreed with the president.
I will say
that we have a
this:
nuclear
he
weapon.
always got an
And we
answer
try
for
to run the
everything,
diplomatic process as much
which
as we possibly
which
can. When the
I get you got to
president
do,
decided that
but I
wasn't
don't
gonna
like
work,
that.
He took the action that he had to take. Now we're in a new phase. That action was successful. We had a wildly successful military operation to take out their nuclear program. Now let's go on to the next phase. And I think the president, look, sometimes he's willing to use peace. Sometimes he's willing to use the military. I think it really depends on what the Iranians do from here.
And what do you think they do from here?
Well, it's an open question, Brett. I don't want to predict what the other side will do, but I think that I know what we'll do if they continue to pursue a nuclear weapon. And I hope they don't choose that path, because I know the president wants to see the Middle East become peaceful and prosperous in the future. That's not going to happen if Iran pursues a nuclear weapon again.
And for the people, so we talked about the people who believe that this is going towards World War III, especially in your own party. There's a section.
Yeah, that's not
very
happening.
vocal. There's another section that says you should take out this regime because it's evil and horrible and has done horrible things for decades.
Not our
How do
concern.
you square those two sides? And can this regime stay in place?
At least not until it affects our
still
allies
have a
directly or
peaceful,
us.
Reaction relationship with the U.S.?
Well, I think the president has squared those two sides quite well. One, because he's the leader of the movement, and a lot of people
And I know
trust
they-
the president as they should.
I know they are affecting us currently, right? But I mean, and it's such a drastic way that there's no way of coming back from it, is what I was trying to say. Yeah, so.
Should they recognize they're not seeing the same intelligence, they're not seeing the same classified documents, they trust the president to do a good job. But importantly, Brett, I think he's threaded the needle quite well here. We had a very particular objective. It was profound and difficult to accomplish.
Do you
the
think they were
elimination
close?
of the Iranian nuclear program,
think they were
and I
close?
think the president successfully did that. You're asking, were the Iranians close to a nuclear weapon? Brett, they were very close to a nuclear weapon. And what I encourage my fellow Americans to think
I know they
about
had the
is that a
uranium.
week ago, the Iranians were quite close
So
to
they
achieving a nuclear
they always
weapon.
had the
Now
capability,
they
or they
cannot
now had the
build a
capability.
nuclear weapon.
But
that is the biggest testament to the president's leadership.
I guess it comes down to if you believe Iran was going to make a nuclear weapon, or if they just wanted to have nuclear power plants and stuff like that, energy and whatnot. So it really depends on what camp or what side you are on that. I'm a firm believer, if you're going to make something, generally at some point someone's going to twist it to make it bad. It's pretty much happened with every invention almost ever. So, yeah.
Into the success of our mission.
Don't take the risk,
1
Brett.
week, without, thank God so far, not losing a single American casualty, we have taken what was a threatening nuclear program that could have destabilized the entire world. Now that program is gone. We did it through effective presidential leadership and also some very, very competent work from our troops.
How often does it happen where you're going to do an interview and you get a Truth Social seconds before? You have some sense of it, but it's pretty detailed, where you are being asked about something the president has just put out.
In this administration, Brett, it happens quite a bit, actually, but we knew this was coming. The draft, it was interesting. I just read the draft about 2 minutes before we went on the air. It was a little bit different from what the president had showed me a couple of hours ago. But again, I knew that he was working the phones as I was on the way over here. So I knew exactly what we were going to do. And look, I love that about this presidency and this administration, is he's always working. He doesn't say, the vice president.
I will say this. For someone that's in their 70s, man,
he says, we're going to do the American.
he doesn't stop working.
Business. The vice president knows what I'm trying to accomplish, and if I get it done, great, because we're going to talk about it and celebrate it, because it is a thing to celebrate. I can't emphasize this enough, Brett. We have destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. 0 Americans have died. That's an amazing, amazing
That's a
thing.
win-win.
Americans, whether Democrats or Republicans.
I'm not even mad about that. Like I said, at the end of the day, we definitely need to take out their nuclear capabilities.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey.
And we definitely need to take care of their nuclear capabilities. And we didn't lose a single American life. So at the end of the day, for me, that's a win-win. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how the ceasefire works. They said about 12 hours, so that should probably be around 6 a.m., give or take their time. But yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see. If something happens where the ceasefire doesn't continue, I'll do it. I'll be back on tomorrow. But like I said, for politics and international, domestic, all that stuff, Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, we'll be streaming from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. I know today we were a little bit late. I had to take care of some things, so I do apologize for that. But yeah, going forward, Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, 5 p.m. 6 p.m. Eastern time. Just want to thank you guys for joining and watching, and we'll see you guys next time. So cheers and have a good night.